All right, Lisa, I think we are live.
Yay.
Yeah. So welcome back to The Positive Effect. I'm so excited that you're back. It's our Wednesday live show, and we haven't had you on from, I don't know, you were like one or two, like beginning of the
Yeah,
year.
I was.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here, and I know that you're about to say this, but I'm super excited to actually turn the tables and ask you like lots of questions. But how should we start? I don't even know.
Well, I think I'm going to start off. I know I'm really excited because we've always trying to keep this an interesting show, right? With
Yeah,
interesting people, and people have kept asking me like, when is somebody going to ask you a whole ton of questions? You're always asking everybody. I was like, well, I wrote a book about my career, but if you want me to talk about it, I can. So,
right.
anyway, I think to get this started, just to kick it off, is I always like to welcome people back. If you find this and you follow us every week and you join this conversation, welcome back. Put your name in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from in the world, because we have an amazing global retail community now that joins us. And also share it with your retail network. We want to share this as much as we can so people can find this conversation. And it's a real mentorship conversation between
Yeah.
retail leaders, which doesn't happen very often, right? And then, also if you're new, welcome. And we're now on Apple Podcasts as well. So you can follow this on Apple Podcasts and kind of listen back to it on your own time, which is great. So I just want to set that stage there. And then, if there's anything that you learn as you're going through, this live broadcast, write it down in the chat if you're finding us on LinkedIn or on the other social platforms, because we like to go back and read it afterwards and really kind of find out what you're learning from these conversations. So, but yeah, today we decided to switch it up a little bit. So I invited Liza Amlani back onto the show.
Yep.
You've been doing amazing things. I read The Merchant Life every week. It keeps me so
Oh,
informed.
yay.
It's so good. But we decided to have you on to ask me a ton of questions
I can't wait.
about my retail career and leadership journey. So I'm like, what are you going to ask me? But anyway, it's all good. I've been on your podcast as well. So if you want to introduce
Yes.
yourself, Lisa, and just tell us a bit about you before we jump into you
Yeah,
asking the questions.
absolutely. My name is Liza Amlani, and I am the principal and founder of Retail Strategy Group. I also founded The Merchant Life, which is I call it my media channel. I do quite a bit of writing for The Merchant Life and the Retail Wire. From my merchant background, this point of view from a retail insider, I love to give like tips and tricks and fundamentals on how you can scale your brand, or how you can think about sustainability differently or product mix differently. And I'm super excited to be here because April, you and I talk about retail all the time and how we want to change the world. And I think from a leadership perspective, I'm sure everyone would love to learn about how you started in retail. And is this something that was accidental, like Ron's career, or was it traditional? How did you start?
No, Ron coined that phrase, right? I actually saw him last
Yeah,
night at an event
I
in New
love
York
it.
City, and we would keep talking about that all the time. But it was accidental, my career, actually. I wrote a whole book about it, right? But if you haven't read the book, you need to pick it up. But it was accidental. I moved out of home at a very young age. Wasn't getting along with parents and like many 17-year-olds, and had to move out and get a job. So I had my first retail job in a company in London in the UK. It was called Naf Naf. I don't know if you remember that, because you worked in
Oh,
Paris
yes,
a little
I
bit.
do.
Oh yeah, do you
Yep,
remember that? Yeah. So
I
yeah,
do.
I worked at Naf Naf. It was really funny. It was kind of like that big like logo,
Yeah,
and yeah.
there was a
So
store on King's Road. I
there
remember.
totally was. Yeah, I worked in the
Yeah,
one on Oxford Street. So I
yeah.
worked there. I worked for some small independents. And then my first real job was like probably Paul Smith when I was around 19 years old. And I got to meet him, which was really cool, at suit fitting in
Oh,
Covent Garden. I know. I was like, I didn't know who he was back
amazing.
then, now I think about that. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
accidental. I moved out of home. I had to get a job. I had to support myself. And so I got a job in a retail store. That's what happened.
Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
love it. And you are now based in North America.
I
I
am.
know you're pretty much everywhere, but tell us about your leadership story. So how did you develop the skills that you kept taking through to every leadership role that you advocate for today?
Yeah, it's a really interesting journey, leadership, right? Because when you start off in retail accidentally, you kind of go into it and you build this experience of working with people. Last week, I had one of the interns on from the Ardennes program on, and she was 17, and she was talking about she didn't realize working in retail how she would get to give that much support and that much advice to people. And so I think like early on when I was starting off and going through those early days, I was learning how to engage with people. I was really shy at school and had a lisp and didn't really do well talking in front of people. So retail really helped me with that, just build that confidence. And then when I think about the leadership skills that I started to learn along the way, when I started to go into bigger organizations that were coming to the UK at the time. So if I go back to when I was in my early 20s, working at Gap and companies like Starbucks, they had really good leadership development programs back then. And I just remember going to conferences and going to trainings. And one of them specifically, I remember when they actually made us videotape ourselves and then watch it back on camera.
Oh, yes.
It was like training facilitation skills. And so I think it comes from experiences along the way, you know, knowing what I know now, going back to knowing what I did then. I had to learn through experience as well as from other leaders that had given me advice or leaders that led me in a way that I didn't find great or motivating for me. So I kind of learned what I liked and what I didn't like along the way. But I really feel grateful for those early years at Gap and Starbucks, because I think the foundations of what they did for me in terms of competency development set the stage for what was going to happen later on in my career. But along my career, I've never just been that person that's waited for somebody to train and educate me. I have a thirst and a desire to learn. You know, some people are passionate about like knitting or I don't know, painting or running. I'm like a learning junkie. So I've always been reading self-help development books from early on. So I think experience, learning from people, having mentorship, going to classes, all those kind of things played into the part of me like developing my leadership skills to where they are. And now if I think about the last 10 years where I really elevated my leadership skills because I was going to lead bigger teams, I invested in myself in terms of education. You know, I took certifications, coaching certifications. I became a John Maxwell team member, part of Brendan Burchard's membership, like so many different platforms to learn and develop and grow. But, you know, I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I know, you know, similar to myself, I spent a lot of time at Ralph Lauren and Club Monaco, and my leadership skills really came from, you know, great training and also great advice from other leaders. Can you tell me about, you know, the best advice you ever received and the advice that you absolutely ignored?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got given from a leader was when I worked at Banana Republic in Florida. I was a store manager at the time. And I remember going on this journey. There was a few of us and we got asked to go to a round table and have an experience with some senior directors. And so we were all driving, you know, in the car, and we were always, what are we going to ask them? And what are we going to talk about? And it was all product and merchandising and promos and all the feedback from the stores. And in my mind, I wanted to ask this person, like, how do I become a really good leader? And like, what does that mean? And how do I get your job? And nobody else in the car was really thinking like that. And I remember getting there and thinking, should I ask this question? You know, how do I get your job one day? And how do I become a really great leader? But I did. I got the courage and I asked it in the room. And he said to me, you know, April, like, one thing I really want you to remember every day is, well, first of all, he shared this personal story of when he was an assistant manager and how his manager had told him he was too nice and he was never going to get anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because we've all been
I get that sometimes
before, right?
Yeah.
And he said that's the worst piece of advice somebody ever gave him. And he said, let me tell you why. And then the next piece of advice was, he said, listen, when you know, go home at night, right, and you're sitting around the table, you're talking to your best friend when you're driving home, what are you talking about 90% of the time? He's like, you're talking about work, you're talking about your day, and you're talking about the people that you work with or for generally. So he said, so, you know, that's what all your staff are doing when they leave you every day. They're walking away and they're talking about how they feel about working for you. And then their family are either advocates for them staying working for you or saying, why are you there? Why don't you go and get another job? It's just a job. It's not that, it's, you know, it's not your life kind of thing. So he said, so when you're working on a daily basis, he said, I want you to think about when somebody leaves your store, what they would say about you at the dinner table tonight. And he said, is it going to be passive? Is it going to be active? Is it going to send out a ripple of positive energy, or is it going to send out the opposite? And it really made me think about it, because I thought up until that point, I know that creating a really good work environment is really important. I know that people want to come to work, do a better job, but then it made me think intentionally about how I'm sending that ripple out in a positive way and creating promoters versus just neutral, just somebody going through the motions of their job. So that was really impactful. And then I went back to the store the next day, and I was in the store, and I was like, oh man, every single person here today is going home, and they're going to talk about something I've said or done, you know? And he said, you know, being too nice will never stop you getting promoted. Just remember that. He's like, you know, all the other things go into it, you know, accountability, conversation, skills, abilities. But he's like, don't ever let somebody tell you that. Because he said, when my manager told me that a long time ago, I kind of believed them. But then that manager got exited, and then he got promoted, and then he ended up being a regional director and on to more. So to me, that was such a golden piece of advice.
Yeah. What about the worst advice you've received?
The worst advice I've ever received.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Because you probably ignored it.
No, I'm so positive and optimistic that every piece of advice I'm given, I always learn from. So, but if I think back to early on in my career, and maybe this is the generation of leadership that we were raised in, it was like, don't be too personal with your staff, or don't show them your emotions. And that is a good piece of advice, because it's a piece of advice of like, you can't cross that line. You're somebody's boss. And I know with young leaders now, they don't know how to draw that line. And what I get asked all the time, like, how personal should I be to connect with somebody? And what's that line I draw across? But that piece of advice actually made me not connected to a team once, because you have to connect the heart and the minds of people, right? For them to want to work for you. So yes, you don't need to be liked, because somebody said you don't need to be liked as a leader. And for a long time, I believed that, but I don't think that's true. I think you don't have to be liked necessarily for your personal preferences, but you do need to be liked as a leader, because if you're not liked as a leader, people don't want to work for you. Then how do you attract the best talent?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually did receive similar advice. So maybe I don't know if it's a retail fashion thing, but I think that that's awesome. I love that you I hate the word pivot, but, you know, just change the way you looked at it. What about any hurdles? What would you say your biggest hurdle as a retail leader is today? Yeah.
I mean, you know, believing in a vision or something you want to do, and then how do you accomplish it with the resources that you have? That's really a hurdle that a lot of people have to overcome today. I know that when I sit in conferences, you probably hear this as well, right? About technology and this and that, and adding and layering things on all the time. And is it really helping people, you know, at the bottom line, drive the experience that you want? So I think that's really difficult. And I think overcoming relationships with leaders that you may in the business have different viewpoints, so that you can accomplish things. You know, I think back to when I worked at an organization, and I had a boss, like a VP, that really challenged me. I share this story in the book, The $1 Million Chocolate Bar Story. I don't know if you've heard that story.
Yeah, I have.
Right. So that was, you know, somebody that came in, and I'm very optimistic, right? I always see the positive and not necessarily skeptical. And so I like it when people are more skeptical with me, because it pushes me outside my comfort and pushes me to a higher level of expectation. Not that I have a high level of expectation, but, you know, the skeptical people around me are always like, no, you could do this even bigger. So sometimes I don't see it. So that $1 Million Chocolate Bar Story and that VP, that was a real hurdle to overcome, because you know, she walked into the room in the middle of a planning session when we'd all been there 2 years, and she was brand new, and she was like, raise the bar. Basically, she said, the sales goal you're trying to accomplish is not big enough. Now, she probably knew more than we did, because she was hired as a VP. So she got brought on and was like, you need to raise these sales, right? Like, this is not working. And so I remember that clearly, thinking, she's out to lunch. She's asking us to do a goal that is just not achievable. So we, you know, all of us as a group spent the rest of the hour strategizing how we were going to tell her that we weren't going to do it, not how we were going to do it. And then when I walk, you know, and then I walk down to her office and say, you know, yeah, that goal that you gave us, it's not really going to work. It's like, if you look at history and trends and this and that. And she just looked at me and she said, April, if you don't believe it, you can't achieve it.
Yeah.
And I went home that night, got a whole load of chocolate bars, wrapped them in the sales goal that she gave me, went and put them on everybody's desk, and mailed them to the stores, and we beat that goal. So I think sometimes my own hurdle is just what I think I can achieve and accomplish. And I think sometimes when we have teams around us that are diverse and have different thought process, they can push us as leaders to accomplish more. And I have learned that through my career.
Okay, that's good. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that chocolate bar story.
It's the $1 million chocolate bar. It's like, I literally went to the dollar store and bought chocolate bars, wrapped them in gold paper, and went home on my Mac and like made $1 million with the brand, like wrapped it and like took 25 chocolate bars. Cause I was like, go home going, how am I going to get people to believe in this? Like, really?
Yeah.
And it's also a story of visualizing, right? Like when you visualize what you want, you can manifest and create what you want, but you have to get everybody to buy into it, to go after it. So that's why I think it's such a powerful story. And that's where create, the second pillar in the book, accept, create, teach, create comes from. It comes from those experiences that I had, that you can create whatever you want, as long as you're visualizing it and seeing it in your mind first, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you think that leadership is natural, or do you think it can be taught?
I think it can be taught. I really do. I do think that there's natural abilities and people that are just naturally talented at leadership because they're people. But just because you're a people person doesn't mean to say that you can be a leader, because leadership requires more than just being good with people, right? It requires the ability to take risks. It takes the ability to make decisions. It takes, against all odds, it takes the ability to create things that other people don't see. Sometimes thinking crazy about things that other people are like, you wouldn't have never, like the $1 million chocolate bar story. It's like, she saw something that we didn't see. So I do think that there's a whole load of skills and attributes that go along with becoming an excellent leader. But, you know, John Maxwell, I learned this from him in a lot of his books, and he taught this when I was in the program, was if leadership is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, you're kind of edging your way up that scale every day, right? Or down when you're like developing your leadership skills. And if you're a 5, you're only going to attract a 3. But if you're a 7, you can attract a 5, because people want to work for good leaders. Good leaders want to work for good leaders. So I think it can be taught. And that's why we created Retail U, because I've seen it over and over again. In teams that I've managed, you know. What do you think? Do you think leadership can be taught, or do you think it, or do you think you
I think it can be taught, and I think that it should be continuously something that is continuously taught. So if you think you're a great leader today, there's always going to be something tomorrow that's going to throw you, or that's going to test you. So I think it's something that fundamentally we should always be learning, always, to be better.
Because it's like going to a gym, right? Like to maintain or get progress in your health routines, let's say physical body, you have to go to a gym. And when you stop, you lose that momentum. So I kind of feel like leadership is the same way. It's like you have to be learning constantly. It's not like it's just going through a course. Like back in the day, you go conference, did a course, and then that was it. That was it. But then it always falls short, right? Because then you not doing it continuously. So I kind of feel like leadership is like, if you want to be, like you said, like be a good leader, you got to keep developing that skill every day. And every day I read something and it gives me like a new perspective. Me and Ron were at an event last night in New York City, a total retail event, and women in retail leadership circle, like a round table. And there was people on the panel talking, and I was like, I always have my notes out on my iPhone, and I'm not texting people. I look like I'm not listening, but I'm always writing down one-liners that people say. And last night, one of the women on the panel said, create green light experiences, not red light experiences for customers, meaning, and this was golden to me, because I was like, how can I use that in a leadership ability? Like create green light experience for your teams, not red light. Because she was like, when you drive through 3 red lights, you remember. But when you drive through green lights, you very rarely remember, because there's no friction. So she was like talking about that from a customer. I was like, oh, my brain goes, how can I turn that into a team leadership moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm always learning every day from people.
No, that's very interesting. And I also think just around the ways that retail is just testing us right now and how things are changing. But we're also putting people in retail in these roles in spotlights, like planners and merchants. And of course, ops leaders and sales teams because we haven't been working together as best as we possibly could.
Yeah.
So what do you think about breaking down silos? I know in retail, we always talk about that. What do you think about that around cross-functional teams and how they work today and how they should work?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because everybody's got their own objective. And back in the day, I remember like having 5-year business plans and strategic visions, right? You kind of, every organization was like, say 15 years ago, 5-year plan. This is our strategic objective, drive more sales or like reduce costs. And this is how we're going to do it. But because things are moving so fast, it's really difficult to have a 5-year strategic plan.
Yeah.
Right. Because you've got to pivot all the time because of what's happening in the market. COVID's a good example. So I think the challenge today with cross-functional teams and breaking down those silos is understanding the pivots that are happening within every department in the business, and then coming to a commonality of like, but are we trying to achieve the same common goal? And then also communication skills and the leadership skills of each person that runs that department, making sure that they're developing themselves as well. Because I feel like in sales and ops, because we're naturally managing big teams of people that manage customer experiences, coaching is such a big part of what we do. Because if somebody has a bad experience with an associate, translate that to a manager, up to a district supervisor, that coaching is going to happen immediately. But in a office environment, because you're all sitting in different areas and you're not managing a team that's active engaging every day, you might not have those coaching experiences as much. So I kind of feel like that is a bit of a complexity too. I don't know how you think about that because you're on the buying side, but
yeah. I mean, I think that, as a buyer, as you know, we've talked about this before. For me, it was imperative that I was in contact with the shop floor constantly. I was always on the shop floor, seeing and talking to my brand ambassadors, my visual teams, my sales teams, and of course the customers. And I think the customer, as long as we put the customer in the middle of everything we do, we're not going to actually see those silos and we're not going to see those barriers, right? And I love the fact that you talk about coaching, and it's important for actually retailers to coach maybe all the teams together at some point within the seasonal like kickoff or the calendar. I call it calendar. But that could be a way forward. Tell me about coaching. Why did you decide to become a coach?
Because I've always been naturally coaching in my leadership skills in terms of leading teams. And I think coaching is just natural to me because I'm a natural curious person and want to ask lots of questions. And back in the day when I was a store manager at Banana in Canada, when I first moved there was a coaching model that they had rolled out at the time that really impacted the way that I led and the way that I interacted with people. And so, me wanting to be really good at whatever I do, I thought, well, if I take a coaching certificate, it's going to up level my coaching skills. And I really want to know the professional level and the technical pieces of coaching. And so that's really why I decided to do it, because I wanted to not just say I'm a coach every day in retail, but I wanted to have that real core professional skill of coaching, which then helped me develop my influencing skills, let's say cross-functionally, because I could use that coaching methodology to pull out of people like my peer group, how to approach things better as opposed to just telling. Because when you learn how to ask really good questions, which is a coaching skill, coaching is just asking questions to get things out of people so that people can discover for themselves. And that skill itself can be used not just in a coaching relationship, but just in life in general, in relationships. It makes you a better leader, a better consultant, a better advisor, because you're going in with the perspective of the other person in mind. So that's really why I did it. And I wanted to be a better leader to my director team at the time and be able to develop them. And so that's why I became a professional coach. And now, I coach people like entrepreneurs or leaders or, executive, different people just on, what they're doing, just because I've learned that skill and I've honed it. That's it. Because I think if you're passionate about something, you want to, I don't know, be a race car driver, go learn how to be a race car driver, hone that skill, like perfect it.
Exactly.
So that's why I decided to become a coach.
Do you miss the shop floor?
Oh, well, I'm back in it right now
Yeah.
because I'm working with Arden in the US, and it's been such a joy because it's like you do miss the shop floor, you do miss
Yeah.
working with customers and people. So just being able to be part of their growth plan here and getting back into stores is amazing. Because yeah, you do miss it. It's in you,
Yeah.
right? Like you
I
can't
miss it
help it.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Like,
miss
do
it
you
too.
miss going in and like talking to people about what the
Oh,
buys
yes.
are like and how the
Of course.
customers are responding? Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quite lucky that I have clients, of course, that have retail stores. So I'll kind of pop in and be like, did you think about this? And like, this is what I used to do. Imagine if, you did this. This is what would happen.
Yeah,
Sort of
just
thing.
like, last week, just merchandising and working with the teams. It's like, it's so inspiring to work with young
Yeah.
leaders that were me at 23, growing in their career and what they want to learn and do and kind of, working alongside them. It's really, really fun. I mean, and I think bricks and mortar is always going to be in my DNA. I
Yeah.
came from the shop floor at 17, right?
Yeah.
Accidentally grew through the ranks, and I don't think I'm ever going to lose that. I've been like, going to go coach another industry. I don't know. It's just I've been doing it for so long. I just love it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
me too. I feel the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah.
Let's talk about 3 tips that you could give to anyone thinking about a leadership career in retail. What would
Okay.
you
Yeah.
say? 3
Yeah.
things.
A store manager asked me this the other day. What does it take to be a successful store manager? I said, well, number one, you have to be able to know how to hire the right talent, right? So if you want to be a leader and you want to grow, it's not about you, it's about the team that you bring on board and the successes you'll have through that team or not. So number one, know how to hire and know how to recruit and network with people. It's really important. A lot of us at the beginning of our career didn't really get that until we started growing into bigger roles. And so if I look back, I would have been better at that at the beginning. Because it would have been a lot less work for me if I had realized I was only as good as the team. So I think really get good at that. Number two, know how to make those decisions to change that team when you need to. When you hold on for people too long, and it's not the right person on your team, it can damage everything. So I think that's really important. And number three, be passionate about customers. If you're going to work in retail and people. So that would be kind of like, if you want to go into retail at the early stage of your career, really think about what you're getting into. But then, in the book, I write about accept, create, teach, the pillars of leadership that I truly believe will lead you to be a successful leader. And accept is creating an environment that's supportive, right? Creating a place of inclusivity. Create is envisioning, taking that pause time, being mindful, having intention, thinking about what you want. And then teach is being a coach and a teacher and a mentor. If you can do those 3 things consistently, then I think you'll build a succession plan behind you, and you'll be able to grow and develop your career even more.
Yeah. What would you say to retailers today that are looking to fill positions that can't find anyone, which is, we've talked about this before as well, but what would you tell those retailers or brands that are looking for, their next leader to, fill someone's shoes like yours on the shop floor? What would you say to them?
I mean, I think if you're trying to fill, it depends what leadership level you're trying to fill, right? Like, so I think there's a lot of us now that have kind of grown through the business and are doing other things. And so how do we backfill those people? Number one, you have to give people an opportunity. You have to give people in the organization an opportunity to take on more, stretch and grow. Because right now, today, hiring externally is a real challenge. So hold on to the people that you have and create those opportunities for them to take more. And maybe they're not 100% ready. Like back in the day, it was like you do the job and then you get the job, right? We're not in that position right now. You might have somebody that's 60 to 70% ready. Give them the chance, but give them the support and the training plan and the structure to actually be successful. And that's where Retail U courses come in, because we can fill that gap for people that don't have those programs, which is really important. So I think that is a big piece of it. But I always say people work for people. So make sure your leaders in any role, any leadership, whether it's an assistant, a store manager, a key holder, district supervisor, director, VP, have leadership skills. It's always been important. It's really evident now that people will follow people and stay for people more than anything else. I truly believe that. Yes, we work for brands, but people work for people. So really look at your leadership skills in the organization. What are you doing about it? Are you intentionally doing leadership development courses? Are you investing? Because a lot of people will be like, oh, it's too much. We're too busy. We're dealing with so much. But, that should never be too much. It should never be a layer on. It should be part of what you're doing.
Yeah, completely agree. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we might almost be out of time.
We are.
And I have so many more questions to ask you.
Well, you can ask me one more because we're at 30 minutes. If you have one more question,
yes,
you can ask me,
I do have one more. I do have one more. What is up for you next? So where can we see you on stage? What are you doing? What are you doing right now?
Well, the book is about to come out on a bigger platform in towards the end of November. So we self-published, but we had so much interest in it, we decided to really put some investment behind it. So it's going to be published on Balboa, and then part of Hay House catalog, which is really cool. So I think there'll be a lot of more coming from that, and just that methodology. It's really a time to kind of teach that out. And I'm going to keep doing what I always do. Like, I love what I'm doing with our den, like helping them and grow their stores and building that. So I'm very invested in that right now. And then, Retail U, we just want more people to use it. So I think I'm just doing what I do every day and get up and live with purpose and lead positively and, see where that takes me. And one thing I'm trying to really do myself is stay present, stay present in the moment, and be present as much as I can for whoever I'm working with, so that they can get the best experience and I can pass on, just be the best I can be in whatever I do. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you one more question. What book are you reading right now?
What book am I reading right now? It's a good question. Oh my God. It's not
I bet you have a stack of books.
I do have a stack of books. Actually, my computer's sitting on top of it. Well, I pulled the FYI out book yesterday for your improvement, which is Corn Ferry. It's a big, thick book, but I carry that everywhere with me. I wish I could find a digital version, but it's just something about this book because it's like this big, so it doesn't fit in my hand luggage. I have to pack it in my suitcase. But pulled that out yesterday because I'm going to start using that more, because I find when I'm using that with people, it really helps them develop their skills and have conversations with their leaders. So I'm using that right now. And then I'm reading, what else am I reading? I think it's called a guide to spiritual enlightenment or something. I don't know. It's something, I'm always reading something spiritual and then something business at the same time. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Be the best version of me, maintain positivity and be grounded, and then skill and ability, pass that on to people. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
What book are you reading right now before
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm just I don't have anything right now.
That's all right.
I don't have anything right now. I've been reading a lot of business books. And yeah, I mean, I don't have anything actually retail on my nightstand as of today. But let's see, maybe I'll have to pick up that big thick book that you're talking about.
Well, it's a manual. It's not a book that you read. It's a manual that you use with people to improve their skills. That's why it's called For Your Improvement. It's basically a manual. You just use it for the rest of your life and you'll be good.
Okay. That's all I need then. I'll go pick that up.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Liza, for jumping on the show and asking me a ton of questions. It was kind of interesting because I'm usually the one asking questions and you flip the script.
I know.
So
I loved it.
Yeah.
And I have lots more to ask you. So let's see, we might have to continue this.
Yeah. So where can people find you? How can they get hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, obviously on LinkedIn, across social. My handle is @themerchantlife. And then I have a newsletter, which you mentioned earlier, called themerchantlife.com. Yeah, you can find me pretty much everywhere. I'm everywhere.
Yeah. You're always in LinkedIn too.
Yes.
It's great. But and thank you for everything you do and contribute to the industry. It's super interesting. I love reading your Merchant Life because it just keeps me so informed. It's great.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. So that wraps up this week's episode of The Positive Effect. Thank you to Liza Amlani and everybody for tuning in. And remember, share this with your network, follow us on Apple Podcast, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Perfect. Thanks, April.